Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Chopinoff. I'm the moderator for this session. Um, this is track A, and our first program this morning is session A101, Super Searcher Tips with Mary Ellen Bates. She's got her cape on this morning, so prepare for an excellent presentation as she flies into her topic. Mary Ellen, take it away, please.
Goodness, thank you. Okay. All right. So Super Searcher tips. This is always a fun session for me to prepare for, and I've got a lot to show you. So feel free to put questions in the chat as I go along, and I'll have time for them at the end to address any questions or comments that you have. So um, I guess I have to start talking about AI because that's what's top of everybody's mind. I think it's required for every speaker on any topic to mention AI. So I'm taking care of it at the beginning. And I think right now we're at the same stage with AI as we were with those early cell phones. If any of you remember, the ones that look like this. And when those were first rolled out, our take on it was they replaced an existing technology, which was landline phones, with a better technology, which is mobile calling. So you can call someone in your car or somewhere away from your home or your office. And that was what cell phones did. And that was all we thought of. Who knew with those early cell phones that you would be able to buy a car or even a house from your phone? And in fact, nowadays, when we buy a cell phone, we don't even think about the quality of the voice connection on a phone call. We're just looking at all the other features that have in a cell phone. And my feeling is that we're sort of like that early stage of cell phones with AI now, where we're faced with, the inundation of AI, particularly generative AI. And we're seeing, there's lots of here, you can do this with it, you can do that with it, but I don't think we're seeing, wow, there are things that I never was able to do before. I didn't have a tool to do that. Now I see that Gen AI is a tool that lets me do something that I couldn't do before. So as I talk about Gen AI tools today, and as you hear all the other sessions during the whole conference, think about what are the things that you could use that tool for now that you couldn't do in any other way before. So since I'm talking about search tips, I'm looking at generative AI from the search point of view. So my question to myself is, where does generative AI work well for search? I mean, we know that it hallucinates like crazy. So if you're looking for false information, that's a great place to start, but that's not what you're using it for. I use generative AI all the time for designing a search, for getting some ideas to start where I'm going next. I use generative AI when I'm looking for what's basically general knowledge or common knowledge, something not that requires an expertise, a subject matter familiarity, but just, everybody knows that the way to fix a door that's not latching properly is to, rescrew in the hinges or whatever. That kind of general knowledge, generative AI is good at. And what I love about it is that you could make internal resources interactive. So using something like Google Notebooks LM or Claude Projects, you can make a special collection or results of a research chattable so that you can ask it questions or you can say, what do you know about this? The other thing that Gen AI does really well, I think, is summarizing content. And so if I collect a lot of information on a topic, then I can say, go through this topic and tell me what are the overarching themes that you see throughout all these? What are the trends that show up in every one of these reports that I've identified? So that kind of, I often think that generative AI is like a well-intentioned intern. They've got lots of good intentions. They sometimes tend to follow directions a little too closely. You still need to supervise the results, but they're great for something that just takes a lot of brain power and time to accomplish, something like summarizing results. So what do we do with Gen AI infatuation? And I don't know how many of you have users or patrons who just think that who needs a library anymore because we've got Gen AI. I actually have a client bless their little heart, who often calls me up and says, I need some research done in this area. I've already run it through ChatGPT and I'm sending you the results so that that'll help you get started. And she knows how to do prompts that, generate a nice table with columns and rows and labels on the top. So it looks really great. Of course, the information that's in it is garbage. And every time that she does that, I spend time at the beginning of the research, which I charge her for, and I double check all the things that are in that, piece of garbage that she sent me. And sure enough, it's all wrong. And so I will always send her back saying, thank you for this. Um, it's, as it turns out, that's not reliable information, but I will do some research and actually identify some good answers to your question, blah, blah, blah. I've tried this with her 5 or 6 times. I've sent her articles about how LLMs work to explain that it's not looking for truth. It's just looking for what's plausible. And it's like going in one ear and out the other. It's like telling your friend that their hot new love interest is actually a disaster. You can say it as many times as you want in as many different ways as you want, and they're still going to think that that person is the cutest thing ever. So, how do we deal with that kind of sort of unreasoning infatuation, besides just throwing cold water on them? What I've found works the best is to know, and I mean, nothing's guaranteed. I still have this client ask me this, says this, does the same stupid things every time with the chat GPT. So there are some people that are just not trainable. So given that, what I think works for the ones that are trainable is to be familiar enough with AI tools that you can have a conversation. And so this what I put here in the italics is an actual conversation I've had with another client who tried the, can't you just chat GPT the answer for me? And so I started talking about, well, here's one that I use for this, and here's another one that I use for that. But neither of them are all that good for this. So it's having enough familiarity with enough different tools that you can have an intelligent conversation, so that when they're, all goo-goo-eyed about whatever they found that they think is the best thing in the world, you can say, oh, I'll check that out. Have you also considered perplexity.ai for a question like this, for example? So it's just like knowing how to respond by showing that you know what you're talking about as well. What I think really helps is always having an example in your virtual back pocket that shows them that you know your stuff. I mean, you don't have to know a lot more than they do. You just need to know this much more. So here's a great example. I've been using this for the last couple months just because I just discovered it. Most of my clients haven't seen it yet. And so they all think that I'm bleeding edge. And that's what you want, is just to appear a little bit more bleeding edge than they are. So here's an example. Perplexity.ai has this interesting focus feature where instead of searching across the entire web, it focuses on a particular kind of content, by academic content, video content, social content, if that's what you're looking for. So if someone is all infatuated about Gen AI and says, oh my gosh, blah, 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 then I'll say, yeah, sometimes it's really useful. Here's something I just discovered in Perplexity. Have you seen this? So I'll mention this. It's a nice little example here. These 2 screenshots, the one on the left was using the web focus in perplexity.ai, and the one on the right is using the academic focus. And while the answer is the same, the sources are different. The ones on the left that were the web are things like something from PubMed, it looks like Frontiers in Science, something from Forbes. The one on the right is from Semantic Scholar, and God knows where else the other things were. So the point here is that it's something that's nice that you can show to an infatuated Gen AI person to get them thinking about more than just the one that they're looking at, and also to give you some authority when you're talking about this, that here are some other ways of looking at it. I think it's important for us to realize that one of our searcher slash librarian slash info pro skills that we all have is knowing how to get information out of an information system of some sort. And that might be a value-added database. It might be our own catalog. It might be, other resources. It might be the web, and it might be a Gen AI tool. And so just focusing on becoming the in-house expert within your organization, whatever it is, on doing prompt engineering. I think it's a great way for them to realize that we know digital resources, regardless of what they look like. That's what our thing is. That's what we love. So the way I become a good prompt engineer so that I can do a better job and so that I can talk to my clients about it is I ask the chatbot for help in understanding it. Chatbots are really great at sort of having been told, how do we work and how could we describe that to someone else. So one of the first things that I do when I find a new um, Gen AI tool, or if a client, an infatuated client, says, "Oh, I want you to meet my new BFF," it's whatever.ai. So the first thing that I do if I'm trying to, use the search bot is I'll ask it, "Can you improve this prompt? Tell me what else I could do." This is actually a great way of learning how chatbots work and how to use them better. So using a prompt like this. So I I was doing a search. I was working with a special library, and they were developing a virtual AI lab, and they wanted to come up with a name for the lab that conveyed its value, not just its gee whiz factor. And so I was going to put that into Google Gemini. And the prompt that I was going to use was, "Our special library within a professional association is developing a new virtual AI lab. Can you write up 5 ideas for a memorable name for this lab that will reflect its value?" So what I'm saying is, could you improve this prompt, Google Gemini? And sure enough, it says, "Here's a revised prompt that's a better way of getting good outcome." So I'll look at its revised prompt, look at my prompt and say, "Oh, what's the difference here? How can I make sure that the next time I do a prompt, it's better attuned to what Google Gemini wants?" And then it explains the key improvements that it suggested and why those work. So clarifying the context, highlighting the value, um, all that. So it's a way of learning how these tools work and how to use them better. So again, this is asking a chatbot about itself. Another tool that I really like is asking a chatbot or a search bot to tell me when it would be useful. So a prompt when I was first playing around with Perplexity.ai was, I said, "What are the best uses of Perplexity AI for a particular library?" And then the key part here is, "Please give a sample prompt for each use." So let me show you the example. I went into Perplexity, said, "What are the best uses of Perplexity AI for a public library in a mid-sized city?" I'm kind of giving it some context. "Please give a sample prompt for each use." So what it gave me here, the text is pretty small, so I can just kind of describe it to you. So it was, so Perplexity said, "A public library in a mid-sized city could use us for research assistance, and here's a sample prompt that you might want to use, or event planning, here's a sample prompt." So it's a way, again, of giving you an idea of how to use a chatbot better. Most of the prompts that I see when I ask a chatbot to talk about, its uses, the prompts are something I never would have thought to ask a chatbot. That, to me, this is the most powerful thing that we can do to keep on top of this new technology, Gen AI, is to keep asking generative AI tools for sample prompts of how to use them, because that gives you new ideas. "Oh, it never occurred to me that I could get a chatbot to help me with that." So this is a way of just constantly expanding your perspective of what these tools can do. I can't emphasize enough how useful that is to ask for sample prompts for each use. Um, Another thing that I use chatbots for, or search bots for, is when I'm starting a research project and I'm not sure where to go first or where to go next. Often I get a question in an area that I'm not super familiar with. And I'll bet a lot of you have had that experience too. You're sort of like, "Oh, I don't know. I guess I'm going to flail here for a little while." Um, so when and again, maintaining client or patron confidentiality, but I'll put in the research question that I got, and then I'll say to a chatbot, "What additional questions should I ask before I start my research?" So it's like asking a search bot to help me with a reference interview. So this was a real life example I did a few weeks ago for a client project. I went to, this was Claude AI. So I went into Claude and I said, here's a summary of the research questions from a library client. My client wants to understand current trends in the US snack food industry focused specifically on peanuts. What additional questions should I ask the client before I start my search? And so I got these suggestions here of ways to narrow down the focus of the project. Some of those I could have come up with myself, but how nice that I didn't have to. How nice that I could just type it into Claude and get suggestions on how to narrow, focus, and refine a question. So again, watch out for confidentiality in terms of how much you tell a chatbot, but a generic thing like current trends in the snack food industry, no, I'm not disclosing any secrets with a question like that. Another thing which I mentioned a little bit a while ago, which I think is just so powerful, is using Gen AI for collections of information. So using Google Notebook LM or Claude Projects, you can upload a special collection. If you've got a digital collection that's just in your library, that's unique to there, you put it into one of these tools and then you can interact with that content. I've used this before where I did a big research project on an area and I got like 10 good authoritative, deep articles on the topic. And then I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to have time to read through all these articles to get the insights that I'm looking for? So instead, I uploaded them into Google Notebook LM, and then I started asking questions of it, and I got really great answers. The neat thing is that it'll give you an answer and then cite you back to the place in that collection of documents where it came up with that answer so that you can make sure that the Notebook LM or the projects made the right inference from the facts that were in the report. I just think these are powerful ways of managing information. I think every librarian and info pro should be familiar with Notebook LM or Claude Projects because these are information management skills. These are information tools, just like all the other information management tools that we have in the library. Okay. Super searcher thinking. In addition to all the AI stuff, I think a lot of being a super searcher today is just changing your attitude about how to find whatever it is that you're looking for. I think since everybody can Google it and everybody can chat GPT it, they're not just looking for information. They can get information from anywhere. What our clients are looking for are answers instead. And what that means is we as researchers and searchers have to go into more places. We have to think about take a broader perspective of where those answers might be. And they might be in places that our users or patrons might not have thought of looking, like social media or Substack, which is my new favorite place to go if I need to kill time, just saying. Or conference posters or patents or whatever. The thing is, clients don't know what information to ask for. They have a problem that they're trying to solve, but they don't necessarily know where all the places could be that they could find the answer. That's our job. So I think when we get a question from a user or a client, one of the most important things that we need to do is find out what's the underlying information need so that we can figure out where in this expanding info universe we can find the best answer, not just information. I think one of the things that's so important to keep in mind is clients ask you the question they think you can answer, not the question that they need answered. And I mean, just think back on your own experience with users, and that's true. And that's fine. I mean, that's human nature. We all do it. But what that means is that we have to expand their questions so that we're getting questions of all that's possible, not just what they think we can do, because especially these days, they have no idea how much of a better prompt engineer we are than they are. And so they think that they've already used search bots because they use ChatGPT. And it's like, oh, no, step back. There's a search professional in the room. We can take care of this. So again, getting them to expand their questions, not to just what they think we can answer, but what they need answered. As a result of, looking in more places and expanding what our services are, I think we need to really watch for that moment. And if you just pause for a moment, you'll all recognize that, that's weird. Don't you ever have that when you're doing a search? You're suddenly like, whoa, that's strange. This is not what I'd expected. So when you're suddenly finding either way more or way less than what you were expecting, that's when I really have to pause, because I know that I'm missing the info universes that are out there if I'm finding an unexpected amount of stuff. So I'll always, what are my assumptions? What are the unspoken assumptions and biases that are embedded in this question that I haven't recognized? Or, and this is stupid, but it happens, do I have the names correct? Do I have the industry terms correct? Am I looking in the right places? Is this the kind of an answer that I'm going to get better results in peer-reviewed literature, or a preprint database, or the open web, for example? So thinking about where's the most likely place that something like this is going to be hiding. Looking for alternative ways of answering the question, or a peripheral, I can't get exactly this, but something like this is parallel to it and probably indicative of the answer. And when I'm not finding what I'm expecting, sometimes I will ask a search bot for suggestions. Again, this comes back to the, here's a prompt, give me some suggestions on how to improve it. Or here's a search that I'm trying to run in PubMed. What are some improvements you can suggest to it? So that's when I think it's more important than ever for us to always step back and re-examine when we're not finding an expected amount of information. I think tied into that is we really need to look for interdisciplinary synergy and know that our users tend to, silo their searches, and it's our job to sort of cross-pollinate that, bring our users into, well, have you considered this other area of information that might be useful as well? Here's a database that we have on top of the search bots that you've been using. This might really give you what you're looking for. So just helping your users and helping yourself to sharpen your peripheral vision so that you see the important outliers, but you're not distracted by the tangential stuff that actually doesn't add anything to the answer. I think what's important is, as you're evaluating what resources to use and what approaches to take, is to think about whether you're familiar with the whole information landscape, rather than landscape, the information universe that's out there. So if this is a topic that you're generally familiar with, number one, don't get too much in a rut. And so even if it's something that's familiar, ask yourself, how is this different from other questions, so that you're not just doing the same old each time. This is an important question to ask yourself. And then when I'm doing a search in an area I know a lot about, I'll start really focused. If I'm not getting the answer right there, I slowly start expanding out, open the lens, this much, then this much, then this much, to see what else I'm getting. When I know what I'm doing, I will often go to a search engine that does track my results, because I like that. I want it to know that I've just tried this, and now I'm trying this, and now I'm trying this, because I know what I'm doing. I'm not flailing. I'm very intentional about this. And so it's helpful to have the tracking of a search engine. When I'm familiar with the Infoscape in general, I still will use one alternative search engine in addition to Google, just because you always get different results. And I will often ask a search bot, not for general help, because I figure I don't need it for that, but I'm looking for the outliers. I'm looking for the unexpected stuff. And so this is something, try it every time and see how often it works. With some kinds of research questions, you'll find this really useful. For others, maybe not. So I'll ask a search bot, what's one unexpected development in whatever it is that I'm researching, and just see if it pops up anything that I hadn't expected before. I don't expect a big answer, but you introduce a little bit of randomness and serendipity in every search, and I think that's a good thing. If, on the other hand, you don't know the information universe that well, which is a lot of the time with the searches that I do, I'm often in a field that I'm like, well, that's the first I've ever learned about the snack food industry or whatever. When it's something like that, I'll start broad and start looking for clues on where the deep stuff is. And when I don't know the Infoscape well, this is when I don't try to fake it. I go to what I think would be authoritative sources first, and rely on those, and then go out from there. And sometimes a search bot is useful for that, Wikipedia, LibGuide, stuff like that. It depends on the search what an authoritative or vetted source is for that kind of question. So I'm not saying use a search bot for every single one when you don't know where you're going, but for some kinds of searches, this like if you're looking for peer-reviewed content, um, consensus, for example, might be a good place to start because you know that it's evaluating a lot of authoritative sources at once. When you don't know the infoscape well, that's when I use a non-tracking search engine. I tend to use DuckDuckGo for that, because I don't want it watching my mistakes. You know, when I go off on a tangent, it's like, oh no, 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 that's wrong, that's wrong. I don't want it tracking and modifying the results based on the mistake that I just made. Um, I want it to have each search is a new search because I have no clue what I'm doing. Another thing to keep in mind, again, this is because everybody has already Googled and Chat GPT the search before they bring it to you, is there often isn't the answer, but we can find an answer that may be close or good enough. When I'm not finding the right answer and I'm feeling discouraged about, this is really tough. Why am I not able to get something? That's when I'll take another 30 seconds and just try one more search approach. I'll remind myself of what the patron is doing with what I'm sending them or helping them with. What's the point of this research? And sometimes, honestly, close enough is good enough. It's like we can't get the exact answer to every question. We can answer the question that we can. So this is a little bit of a pep talk for it's okay to fail sometimes. You can't get every single answer every time because sometimes the answers just don't exist. I'm going to run you through just a few of my favorite super searcher tips or tricks that have worked for me lately, particularly ones that are sort of unexpected. And one of them is sparktoro.com. It's designed for SEO people. So they're trying to figure out, who's my audience and how do I attract them and all this kind of stuff. That's great. That's not what I do. I use it to get interesting leads in a topic that I don't know much about. So I'll show you an example in just the next screen, but the whole idea is trying to figure out what people that do a certain thing or are a certain type of people, where do they hang out? Because that might be a good place to go for information. Again, this is really useful when you're looking for a very narrow topic or something that you don't know much about, but you know other people do. The SparkToro is free for limited results, which is useful for the kind of stuff that I'm showing you now. If you want to go deeper, you can pay. You can buy it by the month for $60 a month if you've got the kind of research that's worth spending that kind of money on. I was doing research on trends in water resources in the West. It was a very complicated project, but the whole thing of who cares about water resources was part of the question. I was sort of having troubles finding out where do these people hang out? What do they read? What do they do? So I went to SparkToro and I said, I'm looking for people who care about water resources. Show me information about an audience who uses the phrase water resources in their profile. Or I could search for people who follow a particular social account or use a particular hashtag. So these are signals that would indicate that what these people do are of interest to me when I'm trying to answer a question. So when I said, show me people who have these words, have the phrase water resources in their profile, then it says people who have the phrase water resources in their profile tend to follow these social accounts, tend to visit these websites, tend to engage in these high engagement hidden gems. I love that. Those are places I might not have thought of to look for information, and they turned out to be really super useful. So this is a way of using a tool that isn't specifically designed for searchers, but actually has some really great insights if you play around with it. This is one of those things you can play around with it for free. Try it out and see if it gives you some good point. This isn't where none of my clients ever say, would you do a SparkToro search for me? They wouldn't even know what that meant. But I use it as a way to get to the answer. I don't ever show a client a SparkToro page like this. It would make no sense to them. But this is showing me the next place to go, another place to look for the answer. Another tool sort of like that is Brave, search.brave.com, which is a great way of fine-tuning a search. If you're having troubles kind of narrowing it down, it's another tracker-free search engine, and so it tends not to filter too much of based on prior searches that you do. What I really like is it's got a really nice AI feature for summarize. So here's a here's a query wheel search I was doing. What's the current electric vehicle battery pack market size? I tell you, I get the weirdest questions. And I selected answer with AI. This again is in search.brave.com. So the first thing I got is a nice summary of what it found in terms of the size of the market. Then it gave me some suggestions on other questions to ask, which is cool. Down below that are the sites to the market research reports that I found. And then below that were other answers. So what I really liked was it gave me a nice overview that I find pretty reliable to just let me know where to go next. The other thing that I like about Brave is that it's got these things called goggles, not to be confused with Google, but perhaps intentionally designed to confuse you with Google. They have these goggles that let you modify the relevance ranking of the results. They've built a whole bunch of them. They're community built goggles that anybody can use, and you can build your own. So some of the ones that they have will, for example, eliminate, those copycat sites where they just scrape the web and it's not original content, it's just the same garbage from someplace else. There's a goggle that will eliminate a lot of that content. There's a goggle that will eliminate the 1,000 most popular websites. That's sort of like million, excuse me, million short, where it eliminates the most popular websites, which lets you drill down to the more focused, narrowed stuff. Here's where you pick it when you do a search in Brave. Here's the question, and then there's that option there for goggles. And here are just some examples of some of the goggles that are available. One limits it to where it emphasizes peer-reviewed literature in the answers, one that focuses on science and medicine responses, one copycats removed short. Anyway, so these are some of the ways that Brave lets you focus your search, which is really handy when you're just having troubles getting a good refined answer. Another one of the resources that I always have to show because I just love it, Tara Kalashane, who is, a national treasure for librarians and researchers. She's got a great collection of search tools that she calls searchtweaks.com. And among the tools that she's got, one of them will eliminate most e-commerce sites from your query. And I'll show an example of that soon. It will generate related terms to your query. So if you're not sure what words to add or what aspects of a concept to include, it'll help you with that. It will construct a search that weights some terms more heavily so that it's ranked higher in the search results. Sometimes if you're searching for someone's name, it'll generate all possible variations on a name and put all of those in phrases. She thinks of the most interesting problems that you have in a search and how to make it better. So let me show you a few of those. The one that I really like is, and again, these are all in searchtweaks.com. One of them is called No Shop Sherlock. And so what it is that it just appends something into your search to eliminate a lot of the most popular e-commerce and shopping sites. Why would you want to do that? When you're searching a popular topic, you tend to get a lot of noise. Let me show you. This was a real live example, and I was so glad that I'd found No Shop Sherlock. So I was looking for the influencer marketing in the fashion industry. And so I put in that influencer marketing in the fashion industry, and I got just a whole bunch of ads and commercial sites. I got nothing useful. It was a whole bunch of sponsored ads and junk. Then I went into No Shop Sherlock, typed in the same query. The tweak had inserted some things to eliminate the shopping sites, and just about everything I got from the same query, searching Google, I got better results because I ran it through No Shop Sherlock. So it's a great way if you're getting a lot of shopping and ad and commercial sites to eliminate those. Another one that she's got that I really like is called Wiki Guided Google Search. So what it does is you put in a search term and it looks for all the Wikipedia pages that mention that term and says, well, here are the aspects of this concept that you might want to consider so that you can figure out how you want to take it. So I was doing research on ketamine and I said, find me any ketamine articles, any articles in Wikipedia that talk about ketamine that mention it at least 4 times. So not just mentioning it in passing. So I got 4 different aspects of it. And so I've got search terms that it's suggesting, as well as an idea of what I'm getting into with each one of those concepts. So it's a nice way of expanding your search and seeing which directions you could go into on it. So again, these were all searchtweaks.com, Tara Kalishane's search tools. And finally, something to just get our attention, and this is one of those things I'm not sure how we can address it, but I just want to share it with you. This was an article that came out in Nature January of this year. The title was Online Searches to Evaluate Misinformation Can Increase Its Perceived Veracity, meaning they found that people who did their own research to see whether a fact was true or not tended to believe what they found, even if it wasn't true. When they invested time to do their own research, that turned their mind into believing whatever it was they were researching. And all I go read the article. I just thought it was fascinating. And I think what that really gets me thinking about is that we have to figure out ways to make good information and good information sources more appealing to our users so that they're not doing their own research to track down, verification for false information. Love to hear your ideas on how we might be able to do that. This is my contact information if you need it. I'll leave this up for just a minute. And we have 7 minutes for questions. I think I saw that there were some chats in there.
Yes, there were, Mariana.
And I'm just, yeah, I can see them here. The top.
One of the first ones, and it was answered too, is there a reason to be polite to AI? And it was answered, they tend to be amenable to politeness, I've found, and they will stop responding if you're rude. Your experience?
Yeah, it is true. And in fact, there was just a study that came out. If you go to my LinkedIn profile or my Facebook profile, I just posted a link to an article um, from a couple of days ago that explained how LLMs work, and it confirmed that yes, and it's because LLMs, chatbots, they're taught on language. And so if they hear aggressive language, they will respond with aggressive language because that's what they're accustomed to. And they've found that search bots do have kind of a kink for being flattered. So thank you so much. This is great. What else can you do? You will get more helpful answers. If you ask a question in a more sophisticated language rather than simple terms, you will get a more sophisticated answer. It's amazing. It is, you really do have to, interact with them like humans in order to get a good response, which just creeps me
For,
out.
for the reference interview, would you also ask Gen AI the best available resources, such as government information, or could that lead to the dreaded hallucination answers?
Yeah. Um, that's a sort of thing that I think calls for a librarian's intuition better than a chatbot's. Because again, remember, a chatbot is just a prediction tool. It's predicting what's the next word that would follow the word before it. And so it's not necessarily based in ground truth or in the librarian's ability to suss out reliable information. So I probably wouldn't.
If you upload documents in a foreign language, such as German, will the platform translate it and answer to your chat in English? Has anyone tried this?
Um, Boy, I think I tried it once and it didn't automatically translate the results. Um, so I don't know. And I don't speak another language well enough to be able to really evaluate the results. So I should probably work with someone who is more bilingual than I am and see what they have to say. So I don't know. And I'd love to hear if anyone else has tried that. Put your answer in the chat for sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
You mentioned Perplexity AI.
Mhm.
What chatbots do you use most frequently?
Oh, that's a good question. I should have said that. Um, I use Google Gemini a fair amount. It's pretty good at looking at the current version of the web, so it's not a static, like ChatGPT is. Um, I use perplexity.ai because it's also searching the live web rather than just a stored version of it. Um, I use Claude AI. It's not as good for knowing what's out there on the web. It quit learning at least a year ago, maybe longer than that. But it's especially good for summarization. So if I have a collection of information that I want summarized or made interactive, Claude Projects, for example, I think rocks because Claude is a really good summarizer. Um, those are the three that I use often enough that those tabs are always open in my browser, always. And I would say that I use them all daily in something that I do. There's other ones that I use occasionally, Elicit, Consensus, but I would say the ones that I find useful and reliable and not too hallucinatory when you ask the right questions, Gemini, Perplexity, and Claude.
Are you concerned about clients' sensitive information being revealed by searching it in AI, such as in the Peanuts search example?
Um, no, that peanut search example was not giving away any secrets. That's why I could tell you all about it because that doesn't tell you anything proprietary. Um, Certainly you don't want to say, my client has just invented this new widget and it does blah, blah, blah. What are 5 applications for it? You won't want to say something like that because that you could worry about. So definitely anonymize it enough. Here's how I would do it, and maybe this is too old fashioned, but when you have a really tough research problem, and if you don't have colleagues around you can brainstorm with, you might throw it into a researcher's listserv and say, hey, I'm having troubles with this, any thoughts? When you do that, you always will anonymize it. So assume when I'm throwing a client's research project into a search bot, I use the same masking or anonymizing that I would use if I was sharing this on a listserv asking for help. And I think all of us know how we do that kind of anonymizing. So do the same thing for a search bot as you would do for a listserv.
I'm paraphrasing this. What are your top search tools, and what tools will you never use again?
Well, I pretty much told you about the search tools. I think so much of the search tools is your brain, is thinking creatively every 6 months, assuming that what you know about search AI, about Gen AI is wrong. That curiosity, that dissatisfaction with what you found already, those are your key search tools, is your brain and creativity, your gut instinct of here's the next place to go, or I'm still missing something, or that just doesn't look right. That human intuition and that librarian instinct of instinctively evaluating content, those are our most important search tools today.
What about people who are trying to remain hidden, such as domestic violence survivors or victims of stalking? Does the AI have safeguards built in place to protect that kind of information?
Well, they're searching like anybody else is. Unless someone is typing in, I live at such and such, how do I protect myself from my stalker? I mean, if you put that in, you'd be a fool, and that would be dangerous, but you wouldn't put that into a search engine either. Um, Queries about finding resources to help to help escape a domestic violence situation, yeah, you're going to be using a non-tracking search engine. You're going to be careful in whatever context that you're in, that your queries are not being tracked. But I think that hasn't changed for forever. That's always been an issue. I don't think that Gen AI changes that at all.
We're just about out of time, so I want to thank you very much for your presentation. And we'll be back in 15 minutes for our next session, which is New Pathways for Search. And our speaker will be Dan Russell. Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. And we're done. Thank you.